thank you first of all so much to the NECA team for inviting us to present and for being such great partners, and it's been really wonderful to hear how you're supporting industry progression already through the presentations we've had today. I'll introduce myself and then let Moritz introduce himself, and then we'll go through the presentation. My name's Jessica and I work in the advisory services part of Schneider Electric. So that is the consulting arm, which you might have heard referred to as the sustainability business. My role is to work with organisations of small to large sizes across every industry to map out a decarbonisation roadmap, to build climate strategy, and to figure out what the implementation pathway is to deliver on those plans. A big part of our focus at the moment is helping align those plans with new regulatory requirements, which we'll talk about today and give you some information on. And I think what interests me the most about this juncture that our industry and that Australia is at right now is that working with organisations, especially large ones that are the leaders in the industry, to figure out what is their appetite for risk. And I know risk really resonates in this room for a lot of reasons, but when we talk about risk, we're talking about climate risk and we're talking about reputational risk and the responsibility these large organisations hold. Mapping that out against our net zero pathway for Australia is really what gets me to work every day. So I'll pass to Moritz. That's just a bit about my role, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Cool. My name's Moritz. I've been with Schneider for almost 10 years now. Background is German, so excuse my accent. It's not as bad as Arnold Schwarzenegger's. I'm working on it. I work sort of probably on the more familiar side of the business for you guys within Schneider, which is the product world and power products. So EV solutions, but also small and large breakers, mostly commercial products, but also on sustainability and enabling contractors, panel builders, and other electrical businesses to tap into the opportunities that now lie in front of us as an industry in terms of the result of the legislation that's now in place and the changes that are ahead as well, because it's going to have a big impact on the electrical industry, which will be the enabler for all of this in a way. But we'll get to that in a second.
Okay, so I think everyone here is pretty familiar. I had the chance to talk to a few of you before with Schneider Electric, but really our main mission is connecting energy management and industrial automation to really drive sustainability progress across all industries globally. We're a global organisation, so the regulations we're going to talk about today affect Schneider Electric as well, and we've got first-hand experience trying to navigate those. But essentially our purpose is to help organisations and individuals manage energy smarter and other resources smarter to be able to support that pathway to net zero that we've talked about. So this is a combination of products, as Moritz mentioned, of software and of services, and together this sort of gives you a bit of an idea of the global scale of Schneider Electric's business and why we come to work every day. This is a very quick overview of the sustainability business in particular, and that's the consulting arm of Schneider Electric that I mentioned that is the team that I sit in. So this sort of gives you a bit of an overview of the full spectrum of our services, which is everything from helping organisations navigate regulations and compliance to energy efficiency, electrification, what those decarbonisation plans are, what their data piece looks like, how do they collect and manage their data, and then how are they going to use that to report it back to the market. And then everything else around carbon management, both from a data perspective, carbon emissions management, and this sort of rounds out our experience of working with organisations to touch every part of their business that has an impact and address that impact head on. This is a very, very small snapshot. We're a very large company of some of the clients we work with, and you may even see some of your large customers on this slide. Essentially, our sustainability business is, we operate in nearly 200 countries globally. We work with a lot of organisations that have been ahead of this regulation from working and operating in global markets, so are a little bit more prepared than Australian organisations to tackle them. We've got about 3,500 consultants globally, and we work across every segment and every company size. Okay, now I apologise for how many logos and acronyms are on this slide. I know it can be a bit overwhelming, but to introduce and to sort of talk about the opportunity that we see for the electrical industry today, we wanted to just give a little bit of global context as to where these new regulations have come from in the Australian market. And I think if you take one thing away from this slide only, it's that they are modelled after global regulations, mostly out of the EU. And the reason that's important is because a lot of large organisations in Australia who have a global presence may have been reporting against a similar framework for many years, and therefore might be a little bit further down the line in their preparation for the Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards, which is this sort of key acronym of ASRS that you'll see throughout the presentation. There's 4 key elements for the regulations, which span governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. There has also been a version of these standards that's been voluntary in this market for quite some time, and it was this year that the mandatory reporting standards came into legislation. So to clarify, because it can be a bit confusing, the first round of disclosures for these new standards will be published next year, but the reporting period essentially starts this year. So depending on if they are an organisation releases their financial results on a calendar year, Jan to December, or a financial year, July to June, that will determine when they're going to report against these standards. So for Schneider Electric globally, we're a calendar year reporter, so we'll submit our results and publish against our financial results in January. For other organisations, most of Aussie companies are going to release it with their financial results at the end of the financial year, beginning of the next year. Again, this is quite a lot of information, but this gives you an idea, and the key thing to take away here is in the first year it affects really large organisations that hit one of these first thresholds in the light green, and then over the next 3 years it matures and slowly starts to affect and call for mandatory reporting from more to medium-sized organisations. But how this affects you is that there could be a lot of your large customers that you're serving, or large customers that you have in your sites to grow your business, that are affected by these regulations. And hopefully today will enable you with some ideas and an opportunity mindset of how you can capitalise on this opportunity and be a solution partner for these large organisations that need to report against this new standard. In a similar phasing of large organisations to medium, there's also a similar phasing of what needs to be reported. So you'll see here in this first year, there's a range of no assurance to limited assurance to reasonable assurance, which is, well, that's assurance when we talk about auditors and the level of scrutiny that's going to be placed on what companies disclose to the market. So that matures over time as well, over the next 6 years. And this is the Australian government's way of letting everyone warm up, get familiar with the regulations, start to test that risk appetite of what they want to disclose, what they're able to disclose, and then map out what their narrative is as a business. How are you going to manage your climate responsibility as an organisation, employing Australians, supporting Australian communities? How are you going to do that, and how are you going to mature that over the next 6 years and years beyond that? So it is a warm-up period. And there is still a bit of ambiguity around exactly what the regulations require, and that's all, everyone's figuring that out as they go. But we will start to see that firm up in the next few years. These are a few observations of how some of Australia's largest organisations, some of the key challenges that they're having tackling this new regulation. So this is, we work with the market at large and a lot of big organisations, but this is also from our own experience for Schneider Electric, being one of the first cabs off the rank to report into this market. And hopefully these 4 observations give you some signals to look out for about what the journey that your large clients and customers are on, and some of the things that they're grappling with, so that you can be there to be a support partner and also capitalise on the opportunity of what they've set out to do. So the key first thing is a mindset shift. For a lot of organisations that have already been releasing a sustainability report, they've already been prioritising this, they've set targets maybe, they've started to do emissions reductions initiatives, they're thinking about this as a competitive advantage. And a way to, when these results get put to the market next year, is a way to really say, oh, this is how I stack up against my competitor. And here's how I'm going to get ahead and really drive forward sustainable transformation of my business so that I can build a resilient business and stay competitive. It's a huge change management journey internally. So if any of your large customers, you've had random requests for data or conversations with different people that you've never met, or someone new in a role that you have no idea if they know what they're doing, this is part of this change management journey that organisations are on to try and navigate these regulations. In general, and I'll go out on a limb to say, the large majority of Australian organisations, the big companies, have underestimated what is required to meet these regulations. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of upskilling, it's a lot of building new capability internally, it's a lot of data management. And if your organisation has never addressed climate risk and what that means for your business in terms of financial resilience, if you've never done that, doing it for the first time is a huge upskill. And then we're seeing a lot of large organisations just constantly test and refine before they're ready to publish these results. And that may mean that they do the process once or twice, maybe even 3 times, to really make sure that when they disclose to the market, they're confident that their board and their shareholders believe and have confidence in what they're publishing, and that it sets them up well for that long-term narrative of how they're going to address this issue in the market. I have no idea, am I way over time? Should I speed it up?
No, no.
Okay, I'll try and talk fast. The key thing here for the electrical industry is there is a huge amount of value to be created and value to be extracted from this regulation. And from these large customers moving down into those medium-sized organisations in Australia, all being affected by this in the next 2 to 3 years. This is not going away. And the amount of opportunity for the electrical industry based on what's required from the emissions, and I'll talk about from the regulations, sorry, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is huge. We know that energy efficiency is a massive priority. We know electrification is a huge accelerator. And as you'll see here on this slide, these 3 things, as well as clean energy transition, are really the 3 accelerators the Australian government has identified that are going to help Australia get there. And they're all, sorry, I have to use one pun, they're all tools that you guys have in your toolbox that a lot of these large organisations do not have. And as you can see here, we do recognise this is going to put a huge amount of demand and pressure on the workforce that the Aussie government has estimated needs to triple in order for us to reach our 2030 goals. But it also means there's opportunity. And that last point here on the bottom right, there's a huge amount of investment being funneled into accelerating these initiatives. So that is funding that's on the table from government to help these organisations, your clients, invest in projects that you have the skills and the tools to deliver on. And that's the really exciting mindset and the opportunity. I'm a little bit over time and I don't want to cut into Maritz's time. This was really just an overview of Scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, because for the initial regulation period, this first year, Scope 1 and 2 emissions are critical, and they'll have to report on these every year after. And from the second year, Scope 3 emissions become necessary to report on. Scope 2 emissions is really where we see everything around any emissions created from purchased energy, so warehousing, production, every buildings, Maritz is going to talk about that, but essentially everything that comes from energy efficiency, electrification, all these initiatives that you guys are so well placed to help accelerate in the industry would help reduce Scope 2 emissions. There we go. I've talked a little bit about this already, but 3 key impact areas that we work with these large organisations to address when it comes to Scope 2 is environmental impact, reducing emissions, cost reductions, minimising waste, improving resource use, so there's less waste and there's less costs, because there is a lot of efficient opportunities that are really just underneath the surface, and then operational excellence, which comes building resilience, minimising downtime, and really making sure that everything holistically is working smart and fast together. I talked a little bit about government investment, but just wanted to call out these grant programs. This is for New South Wales in particular. So this is further money on the table the government is putting into the industry to accelerate these initiatives. And these are grants that you can either potentially apply for yourself or suggest to your large customers. And this is cash investment into your industry that can help you not only accelerate your skills and experience in this area, but quickly get programs funded and be part of this decarbonisation journey for these large organisations, embedding yourself as a partner and a solution provider that can really help them reach their goals. I'm going to pass over to Maritz. I did start to talk very fast at the end there.
Thank you.
But I look forward, if you have any questions, I look forward to discussing at the end.
So a lot of information to absorb here. I think I want to bring it down to the bottom line for your businesses effectively. What this means is we want to enable businesses that we work with, that work with us, to be the businesses of the future that are successful in the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years, because this is going to be much bigger than it is today. Right? And right now is actually the time to be thinking about how do you set yourself and your business up for success? What's your strategy to tackle this, not only to support other businesses on that journey, but also what do you do for your own operations and your own business, because every business eventually will be impacted by that, indirectly or directly. Specifically the electrical industry, and we see this quite a lot in the large contracting or medium-sized contracting firms, the panel builders, of course, but other electrical businesses as well. So I want to talk to you about what this means for your business in specific. Jess has just obviously talked about where all this comes from, the framework. It all leads up to the Paris Climate Agreement. Australia set a target, and in very simple terms, Australia is now looking at where do we change our dial so we can achieve the target as a country? And the industry, businesses play a major role in that, where you guys will be able to really support a lot of businesses on that journey. This will look familiar. You've seen that in the slides before. So I want to just call out on the right-hand side two things. One is the strategy, and the other thing is the targets and metrics that your customers might be going through. Some of the businesses, I see stars in the room, and some other businesses as well, potentially will be having to report on this as well themselves. So they will be directly impacted, but others, or the majority of the industry, probably will be indirectly impacted in ways that they have to tackle this for their customers to some degree. Let's take a big business that is impacted. They will look at their strategy in terms of, for example, climate risk scenarios. So they will look at how exposed are we in our operation in terms of bushfires, floods, storms. We've seen them all, especially in the last few years. There were quite a few of them that impacted businesses that were out of power, out of operation, lost money every day by not being up and running because maybe their electrical infrastructure wasn't working. I mean, the floods in Lismore, all the supermarkets, the big stores out there, it took weeks and weeks for the electrical infrastructure to be rebuilt. Every day was lost money. So they will be looking at how can we be more resilient, not only from the technology perspective, maybe there's other technology we can use to be more resilient, stay up and running faster, or stay up and running first of all, or get up and running faster. But also, how can we prepare for this, and how do we report on this? Because at the end of the day, those businesses will also want to show to investors and others out there that they are a successful business and they've got a plan for this. So they might come to the electrical industry and be like, hey, our electrical infrastructure is critical. All our fridges, all our whatever it is, depending on the business type, that's where you guys can play a role in providing innovative solutions and upselling and making sure they stay operational. And then the targets and metrics is a very interesting one as well. So Jess has mentioned as well that a lot of businesses are now getting their head around collecting all the data, translating that data, what does it mean for them, and how does it feed into their reporting as well. So one thing in there is Scope 3 emission reporting, which is the most complex, I would think, or at least it takes a lot more time to collect the data, which is the whole value chain of a business. Not their office energy consumption or their fleet fuel consumption, for example, but it is really everything that happens once products go out of the door, or everything that happens before they get their product, their sourcing, etc. So that's quite complex. That does include as well their service providers. So in some cases, and we've seen that already, businesses that are mandated to report might start asking questions down their value chain to their service providers like, hey, you make up a small portion of my scope 3 emissions. What are your emissions? What's your strategy? What are your goals? How are you achieving them? We need your data. Can you give it to us? And we had some customers, I won't name them, Panel Builder, for example, having a conversation with a large mining customer. They've got a big contract with them. They were asked on the spot, hey, what's your data? Can you send it to us? We need it. We want it in our reporting. They were like, we have no idea what you're even talking about. And I feel like a lot of businesses are sleepwalking into this in Australia. It's still, and I'm not saying that you guys are, but it is a topic that is urgent. It doesn't feel urgent today because for many it even feels like you're not impacted, but really it will impact a lot more businesses than you might think.
Can I just add one other thing there?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go
That
ahead.
we're also seeing, as Scope 3 emissions come into focus, is we're starting to see large organisations set parameters about the type of suppliers and service providers that they want to work with. So they're starting to set guidelines and additions to contracts to say, if you can't provide me this data when I need it, or if you can't sign this Modern Slavery Act, or all of these things, you're actually no longer qualified to be a supplier of ours. So it's really important to think about not only the opportunity, but how you can position your business as a partner to the rest of the industry so that you don't miss out on opportunity. It's not even just about what's to gain, it's also what's to protect. Sorry, just to
No, that was great. And that's actually a really good example. Another one is tenders. So I don't know who of you are involved in the actual tender process. If you're pitching for business, we see this more and more. A while ago, it was okay to just have certain certification, your ISO whatever. Great, tick the box. Then it moved to, okay, what's your data? So what are your emissions as a business? How do you measure them? What's your footprint? What are you doing about it? Feels like this is coming, but actually that has already been in place for quite a while. And the next level then as well now is, what are the solutions that you can help us with to lower our emissions? Most of them probably in terms of energy efficiency, again, the scope 2 that just mentioned, that electrical businesses can bring to their customers as part maybe of that tender, but in general as well, the innovation that you can deliver to your customers so they can achieve their targets. So you become an enabler in a way. And these will be questions in tenders as well that we will see more and more. Brisbane Olympics in 32, that's a carbon negative event, meaning there's going to be a lot of focus on anybody involved in building the stadium, other infrastructure, including electrical infrastructure. If you want to be part of this, I think you've got to tick a lot of boxes. And if you don't know what all of this means, now's the time to get ready. Now, I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly, but this is just one of the examples as well. If you take buildings, 70% of emissions of a building is the actual operation and maintenance. That's a stat that actually surprised me a bit. Because if you think about everything that goes into the build of a building, you think like, oh, that's causing a lot of emissions. There's a lot of energy used, a lot of emissions in that process. But actually, it is about how that building is run, how efficient that building is. And that's a point for the electrical industry. So only 30% is the design and build, which is still important to look at. It's not necessarily your job directly. However, you will or might be involved in providing ideas, solutions, building management, energy efficiency ideas for buildings as well. So we need to focus on the operational emission, though, because that's where the biggest opportunity lies. And that means if you look at the building infrastructure we've got today, so buildings that will be here in 2050, and that's quite a while away, 50% of them already exist. So most of them are probably fairly inefficient buildings, to be quite honest. If you then look at, okay, if we replace all those buildings and build new ones, which doesn't make any sense at all, obviously, because there's already sunk cost in a way with the buildings having been built, and then you knock them down and whatever. But if you would build new buildings, you could build much more efficient buildings with a lower footprint. But that doesn't make sense. because we've got most of the buildings in place that we will use for the next 25 years. So really a big focus is on the retrofit. And again, that's where then a lot of opportunities come to the electrical industry in order of optimizing the energy consumption in buildings. One of many examples, so it doesn't have to be buildings, but just calling that out here. For example, what are the technology solutions, the digitization that the electrical industry can bring? I'll skip through that. Just one example is energy reduction and automation. So simple things like zoning, space utilization, but also equipment and performance through predictive maintenance. AI technology will play a big role in there as well. So lots of things that consume energy in a building can be optimized. And again, most of them you guys could tackle and help your customers with. If that's a building manager, for example. But it could be anything. It could be manufacturing, could be other industry, could be transport, could be everybody out there. A lot of big businesses will need the knowledge and the skills that you guys can bring to them so they can achieve their targets. That's just one example.
I'll just add one more quick thing there. Energy efficiency tends to be one of the first levers of decarbonisation that we suggest to clients because it's got the lowest hanging fruit. We know, based on the stats on those buildings, we know that there's so many inefficiencies that lie just below the surface, and it's also where organisations see the quickest results and the most savings. So a lot of these decarbonisation initiatives require an investment, and it's a long time till you get that payback period. If you think about how am I going to start engaging my entire supply chain, that's a huge program and investment. But energy efficiency is one of those quicker levers that can deliver results. And that's often where we see a lot of quick buy-in from these large organizations. They're like, oh, I can reduce emissions, reduce my costs, and improve my resilience and operations. That's a win-win-win. So this is a really key lever that a lot of our large organizations are starting with.
Agree. So, again, taking a step back, what does it mean for you? I've kind of covered it already, but we can see that a large number of businesses in Australia are already developing sustainability roadmaps. So they are starting to engage their value chain, and there's a significant growth opportunity for the electrical industry to capture this now, but especially in the next 3, 4, 5, 6+ years, when actually theory comes into practice. So eventually, after a strategy is built, a business gets to the stage of like, okay, great, we're here today, we want to be there by 2030. What are the things that we need to do in between? And who can help us? And hopefully that's you guys. As mentioned as well, data. They will be eventually asking for data if you're big enough of a service provider for them. So we've seen it before, as I mentioned. Be ready to have that data for your customers if you want to satisfy them, or actually even be proactive if you already got that data. If you've got a strategy for your own business, which is hopefully a bit less complex than a large mining organization that's national, global, whatever, you can potentially wow them with like, hey, this is what we're doing, we're on the front foot, we want to help you with what you're going because we know what you're going through, and these are the technologies that we can bring to you, and this is what it meant for us. You can really craft a marketing story out of this as well and really set yourself apart from the competition. Plus, the frameworks that we've shown you, the legislation, that's just what's available today. Really, it only goes to 2027 from a benchmarking or size of businesses that will be impacted. More and more over the next years will be. What's happening in 2029, 2030, we can see from our experience globally, and it's to be expected that the threshold will be lowered and lowered, so much more, or many more businesses will be impacted by that as well. Plus, the market is catching up quickly. We can see businesses that engage with us on this, they're really putting on their strategic hat of like, hey, we see an opportunity in that for many reasons. We want to be the partner of choice, and we want to, get a piece of that pie. Now, that might seem like a daunting task, but it actually is not as complex as you might think. So we've got the expertise through our sustainability business, but also our technology and the relationships that we've got with the industry and associations like NECA as well, where we then sat down and were like, okay, how can we help the electrical industry to get the most out of this and make this in a very efficient way but be very effective at the same time. So what we've done is we've developed a program that we offer to contractors, panel builders, the electrical industry to join, which is what we call the Decarbonization Champion, to tackle all those challenges that we've talked about, starting with your own business. So the idea here is, in that framework, once businesses sign up and go through the process, we want to enable them to experience what their customers might be experiencing for themselves. So really help them walk the talk and learn as you go, starting with basic, or not only basic, but like good science-based sustainability knowledge. So you've got the same language that your customers are talking. You can share that across your business as well. So we ask everybody joining the program to go through our sustainability school, which is not too complex, but it covers a lot of groundwork. And then we get into the practical phase where we then help businesses who are part of the program measure their emissions. So we help them translate their energy bills, like gas bills if they're using gas, their fuel consumption for their fleet, into emission footprint. So Zygo Activate is one of our softwares that we use for that, which we give partners as part of the benefits for the program, where they can then play around with that and really see, okay, in 2023, that was actually our emission footprint. And that's good to know. But then the important step is, okay, what do you do with that data? And where do you want to be as well? So we help them with consultants from our sustainability business along that whole journey of like setting realistic targets. So they are, I guess, achievable, but also not too lax. So you want to be seen as a business that is really invested in this. But also talk about how do we achieve this. The technology that's used in most cases you guys are familiar with. But what does it mean in terms of building a roadmap and a strategy, maybe over the next 5, 6, however many years you set yourself? What other things and when should we consider them? What's the return on investment of those things? Does it make sense for us to invest in new renewable energy, for example, or should we look at electrifying our fleet from 2027 onwards? Start with 2 cars, 5 cars, whatever it is, could be anything, could be even simple things like optimizing your warehouse lighting, which is the obvious one, or other things in the mix. Really, the sky's the limit, whatever you want to do, to then have a sound roadmap so you can make informed decisions on like, hey, okay, this is where we are today, this is where we want to be tomorrow, these are the things that we want to do to get there, and this is as well then the story that we can tell our customers so they're confident in our expertise, because we've been going through this on a different level, but more or less it's the same concept. So we can then use that same and other technologies to help them achieve their targets, and you're seen as a partner of choice, hopefully, that's walking the talk and is really enabled and will be winning the projects in the future. Now, there's a program fee attached to that as well, but that's mostly an investment, I would say, in terms of strategy for your business. So you get, of course, the software, you get the consultant hours, we do a workshop one-on-one with your leadership team, or whoever you want to be part in that, want to have being part in that, that's the right wording, anyway, you know what I mean.
You got it.
And then also we'll help you develop the business cases and like, okay, if we want to achieve this, this is one of the things we should look at, this is what it will cost, this is what the benefit will be, really talk about the return on investment, plus we will give you a free product to that as well where it makes sense. So a lot of our technology and solutions can help with energy efficiency and whatever we might find in your operations. So for example, we've had cases where when we do the site audit, which is part of that as well, the consultant work, the consultant really looks at everything that's happening on site and identifies areas where Schneider products can help. So benefits as well in here is using Schneider technology to optimize your operation after health check, I like to call it, and then see ideally energy reduction and thus cost savings as well. And also for you to experience what the benefits are, not only in terms of cost savings, but also CO emissions drop. So again, that can go into your story and can really prove what technology can do. And then over time, this is a longer term process. It's not just a one-off, 1 month, you're done, great, see you later. Usually we see over multiple years that customers then see really the benefits of that. They can then see the cost savings, the returns coming in, and you can then start saving costs as well. Our consultant, I'll skip through that one, but we will do the one-on-one workshop after the audit. The audit will look at many things, including these and more, but you can see that there's a lot of obvious stuff like lighting in your offices, maybe if you've got a manufacturing site, or looking at your warehouses, looking at everything that consumes energy, but it's not only energy related. So we're not only focusing on our Schneider world. We look really giving your business a full health check in the sense of like also looking at your metering data. So we request interval data from your energy provider. We will look at where are some outliers, some peaks, some weird things happening. Why are you using so much energy at 7 a.m. when nobody's in the building? Things like that are really going to make up a bucket of opportunities for you to save cost. And we've got the latest customer that we've gone through the workshop with, we identified $20,000 in cost savings. And that's not a big business per year for not much of an investment. Sometimes it's also human behavior changes or finding leaks or whatever it is that we identify in this process as part of being a member in the program. Now, long story short, with our expertise and team that we've got access to, and then you do have access to as well as part of the program, we really guide you on that journey so you don't necessarily really have to invest in your own sustainability manager, which most of the businesses that I talk to don't have the resources for or don't see the need to employ themselves or can't. We are really making this very efficient in terms of you can draw on our resources, on our expertise. We come in because we know what to look at. We support you on that journey. We give you the information. You can decide what you want to do with it. And then we help you take action as well with a free product in the first 2 years. And of course, there's ongoing support as well. And we're evolving the program as we go because regulation's changing as well. And we want to make sure that our partners that we work with are equipped and are the winning businesses now and in the future, because this is going to evolve fairly quickly. This is just an example of the software we use. I'll skip through that, but you can see it's very easy to use, very intuitive, gives you a lot of data points for reporting, for internal reporting, external reporting if you need to, but also informed decision making and really looking at the whole roadmap that can flow into your business strategy overall. Now, that's, I think, the finishing slide I want to focus on 1 more minute on, which is, just to, I don't want to say justify, but in a way, give you an idea of the opportunities that lie in there for the investment that it would take for you to be part of this. So the Zygo Activate software alone is worth more than that, but also the energy efficiency audit with our consultants can cost quite a lot of money. The strategic workshop, the free Schneider product, there's a lot of opportunities for you to save cost for fairly little investment if you're purely cost-driven. That aside, there's a heap of other things to look at in terms of competitive advantage. Looking at what your customers are going through, understanding what they need, being the partner of choice, having the data, being able to walk the talk, and do this in a very efficient manner and hopefully very effectively for you as well. And that's what we offer. So, long story, but I hope you got a lot out of it. We're here to help you and talk to you about it, to see if that's a fit for your business. We're very, very happy to really take any questions, I think, at the end of the presentations in the panel or any time after as well. And I'm sure the presentation can be shared as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.